Good morning, everyone. We'll get started. This is the August Agency Technical Administrator meeting for the Chicago COC. My name is Mike Corcoran. I'm the Director of Information Services for All Chicago, and also joining me today are Alex Fuller and Kevin Torrio from the HMIS team. Little housekeeping stuff. Again, welcome. The setup of the webinar is that all non-presenters are muted. Please use the questions area in the GoToWebinar dialog box to ask questions. We'll answer as many in real time as possible. The questions should be available in the left side controls. You click the arrow to expand and type your question in the text area and click send. The webinar is not intended to address specific client data situations or other questions, operational questions like that you may have. Please contact the help desk to resolve those. We get this question every month. The materials of webinar recording will be made available via URL link on in the help desk that we'll send out. And I also include a copy of the slides as a follow-up email to everyone who is invited. The agenda for today, we're going to go through several groups of updates, one from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, some updates from our vendor WellSky, some updates from our group for the COC HMIS group, an update on the data quality process that's currently in progress, a list of reports that are sent to agency technical administrators. We noticed we get quite a few questions, and particularly as some of the ATAs are new. So we want to go through those and describe what those reports are and how to use them. Talk a little bit about some quarterly COC webinars that we can conduct, and then take any questions at the end. And as always, we reserve some time at the end for questions, but if you have questions as we go along, please submit them in the questions box as part of the webinar. The first topic is HMIS updates from HUD. They conduct HMIS lead webinars on a monthly basis, and these are some excerpts from those webinars. The first is that there's an NHSDC Fall Conference on October 22nd and 23rd in Portland, Oregon. They usually discuss things of interest, including things about the HMIS and data issues or other data topics regarding the HMIS. As we mentioned previously, there are no HMIS data standards updates scheduled for, at least no major ones scheduled for 2026. Those have been postponed to 2027. As a result of a little bit of the fire drill the last time when we did it last year, HUD has reviewed their timeline for when certain things happen as part of a data standards change. Basically, the idea is to allow more time both for vendors and for COCs to prepare for the changes. So the old timeline used to be that they would get change requests from federal partners up until the end of the year before the data standards go into effect, and now they're moving that back by 3 months so that all those requests have to be in by basically the year before the data standards go into effect. They typically go into effect in the beginning of the fiscal year on October 1st. The change reviews need to be completed by mid-October now. The final federal partner approval has to happen by October 31st instead of March 31st of the year that the changes go into effect. And a big one here is releasing the technical and programming documents to vendors. They used to get them only 6 months in advance of when they actually needed to be deployed. And now they're going to get those on January 1st, with them being final on February 1st. So that should give the vendors, including ours, WellSky, more time to actually complete the changes. The data collection guidance is going to go out a month earlier. And again, there's no change to the actual date when the data standards go live. So the notion here is that by giving everybody more time, there'll be opportunity for not having so many reports like APRs and things like that be late in terms of when they're available to upload, along with other repairs and fixes that they have to put in place just because everything was so rushed previously. Additional items, there's no definitive items coming out of this, but they're looking at alternate ways to receive data other than these large aggregate file uploads. As you should know, SAGE is the reporting repository for agencies that upload APRs and other reports. There is a user manual for SAGE, and the link is provided in the slide here. So it's another resource if you haven't used it before, to use the user manual of how to actually operate at SAGE and do all the uploading and corrections on the APR. In a previous ATA meeting, we talked about EVA, the ability to do a hashed file export from the HMIS for your project and upload it into EVA and do analysis on the quality of your data and corrections and things like that. It now has a demo mode that doesn't require you to upload your data if you just want to go and familiarize yourself with that tool. And the link to that page is also in the slide. As of June 1st, HUD has made a change where SAGE will require new program eligibility forms if the clients who are enrolled in your project do not have a living situation that is homeless or institutional. To explain how they qualify, this was done in a different way previously, and now right in SAGE, there's the ability to click and fill out that form, and we'll post a help desk article with the details. Didn't want to turn this into a seminar on the program eligibility form, but we'll pull the data out of the slides and put that into a help desk article. And finally, HUD is considering defining an application program interface to facilitate data sharing and interoperability with other systems. People are very excited about this this prospect, and so I thought I'd spend a minute or two talking about the API and where it might go. So what is an API? It can get into some fairly heavy technical kinds of things, and in its simplest definition, an application program interface is a way for an external program to directly, and in most cases in real time, you'll notice that like for business objects and things like that, there's a day's delay in the access to the data. For APIs, for the most part, they're talking directly to the live application and the live database. So an API allows for an external program to directly and in real time read, create, and update data in the system, in this case, the HMIS. HUD hasn't published their API spec yet, so we don't know whether the API will actually enable creating or updating data. But as an example, one of the issues with HMIS is that if an agency has its own case management system, right now people are doing duplicate data entry into the case management system and into HMIS. An API would make it possible, and by possible I don't mean easy or straightforward or in any way trivial. It would be possible for the case management system to take data out of the case management system and write it directly into the HMIS, as one example. Another example would be that if we wanted to do mass updates, again, assuming we could write into the database, if we want to do mass updates to correct the fact that many records don't have exit dates, or do some other mass update of data An API would allow us to do that if we had the programming infrastructure to utilize the API. So it requires programming skills, it requires knowledge of what the HMIS system and data are, as well as knowledge of whatever system is accessing the data to make sure that the data matches up if you're going to do something from one system into another. If we were to look into something like this, it would also require updates to data governance, including privacy, data sharing, data usage, release of information, things like that, because now we have a different way of making data available to third parties, potentially, or third parties putting data into the system that didn't before. It'll likely be an extra cost item from the HMIS vendors. And one thing to consider is that even if there was something put in place, like something from a case management system into the HMIS, the case management system is going to be updated by its vendor. HUD is going to update the HMIS data standard every 2 years. And so the API will also need to be updated every 2 years, and any program using the API will need to be updated to reflect all of those changes. Just a little bit of a caveat that it's not a magic bullet for just because this is available automatically every system will be able to talk to each other and update data back and forth and things like that. There would be a significant amount of work involved in doing that. But having anything like an API as opposed to just doing bulk data exports of a CSV file or things like that does open up some avenues that could be explored for making data updates, data sharing, things like that a little easier than it is now with a very closed off system. So the HMIS API is in the early stages of definition and discussions with the HMIS vendors, and we'll keep you posted as this progresses. Hopefully that helps a little bit in understanding what it is they're talking about. If you have any questions at this point, be happy to answer anything that comes to mind. Okay, seeing none, I'll move on. So WellSky's updates, they have provided us a roadmap of things that they will be working on in the relatively near future. The things that I would, the road that I would highlight, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in a specific example. In the row that's labeled UI, UX, user interface, user experience enhancements. In the change that they made last year, right before the data standards updates, they're using software elements in the application that allow them to do what are called here front-end data quality validations. And they haven't been specific with what changes they're going to be putting in place, and as we get those, we'll share them with you. But the new user interface software elements allow for the system to not only check to make sure that if somebody's supposed to be entering a date, it's in the form of a date. As an example, it could make sure that the date falls within a certain range. Or if they're entering a number, that it falls within a certain range. So it does what's called editing. It makes sure that if it's supposed to look like a date and needs to be within the current year, or in the case of like a housing move-in date, it needs to be between the entry and exit date. The place where you enter the data now can do that sort of thing and reject things that don't fall within the right parameters. Again, they haven't been specific with what those changes are going to be in the next few months, but we meet with them every week. So as that gets more specific, we'll share those with you. In the actually the third column where it says entry exit table updates in the 3 to 6 months time frame, the specific example that they've shared with us that I'll discuss in the next slide is they are planning on changing how housing move-in dates are entered into the system. And so currently the housing move-in dates are entered using the update assessment after a housing move-in date update has been created. This has been confusing for lots of people because they see that there's a review date as you add a review, and people skip over actually putting the housing move-in date into the assessment. There could be multiple values in the assessment depending on what visibility looks like within the agency. Housing move-in dates can be shared across projects. It's a very confusing kind of thing, and WellSky is basically acknowledging that that wasn't the best choice for how they implemented it. So what they're planning on doing is to change that to enter the housing move-in date as part of the entry exit update, and they have a single entry per project within each entry exit to a project specific to that entry exit. And so there's a screenshot on the right-hand side showing the data collected as part of the interim review. It doesn't show the housing move-in date, but from what we understand, and they have not been completely specific in how they're going to do that. My understanding is that there would be another spot on here with the actual housing move-in date when you select the interim review date of housing move-in date, and that's where you would enter the date in the same way that the review date is currently being entered. WellSky also intends, so Dana has a question, will this change the entire matching process as well? We currently have to enroll folks before they move in. That part of the process does not change. The change, so in the sequence with coordinated entry, you would still get a referral and you would still enroll folks, and you would still do an update to indicate the housing move-in date. The change is how the move-in date is entered within the context of the update. Currently, you create the update and then you have to go into the assessment to enter the housing move-in date. In the future, in the near future, as you create the update, as you create the review, you would enter the housing move-in date right underneath where you enter the review date. So it doesn't change the matching process. It doesn't change anything else other than where the housing move-in date is located. Does that answer your question, Dana? Okay, so WellSky intends to migrate the existing data that's contained in the assessments to this new format where the housing move-in dates are part of the update. As part of implementing this whole thing, given that there are potentially multiple move-in dates that one would have, that a project enrollment might have visibility to, we've asked them what their methodology is for this so that we can start doing some audit reports and provide things to each agency about what the old value was and what the new value, or what value got migrated over. But with any migration like this, there are probably going to be corrections required to the migrated data. And so just a heads up that we're going to have to collectively look through the data after it's been migrated over to make sure that it's still correct in terms of the housing move-in date assigned to each user for their projects that require a housing move-in date. So we'll also be updating training and conduct sessions to prepare users for this. And the change, according to WellSky, because they want to avoid all of the federal reporting stuff with LSAs and SPMs and HIC and PIT and things like that, it will probably be early and maybe as late as the spring of next year. But just a heads up that this is coming. And again, we will, there's a lot of other work that we have to do in terms of the reporting that we do and where we get the housing move-in date from and all the reports that include it. So there's a significant amount of work involved for everyone. Oh, Dana, sorry, you lost connection. So let me just, for everybody's benefit, say it again. So it does not, other than the reporting, it does not involve a change to the matching process. You will still get a referral from the coordinated entry group. You will still enroll users enroll clients who are referred to you into your project, and you will still do an update to reflect the housing move-in date when they move in. The change is that the housing move-in date will be recorded someplace, probably right below the review date in what you can see on the screen now, and it will no longer be entered as part of the update assessment. It's just a question of when and where the housing move-in date gets entered in the update that is still going to occur, but it doesn't change the process. But yes, it is a big change in terms of the data migration. And I think that's where we'll need to, it's a change in terms of the data migration and change in terms of the process that users follow to record the housing move-in date. Yes, the process is the same, other than where the housing move-in, when and where the housing move-in date gets entered in the update. There's still an update. The update is still the type of housing move-in date, but it will be entered in the screen. We also put where you put in the stuff that you can see on the screen, and it will no longer be entered in the assessment. Other questions? And again, don't have a huge amount of specifics to share with you. This is kind of a heads up that this change is coming. We'll be much more interactive with this as we get the specifications from WellSky and they start setting dates on it. So for the COC HMIS update, work is continuing on the All Inside project with the federal government to improve data visibility in the HMIS. A work plan was submitted to the HMIS committee for their review. There's also some additional information on the client contact information sub-assessment, and some information on updates to DFSS reports. So one thing that I wanted to cover as part of the All Inside changes is, I know there's some folks that are new to HMIS, new to ATA roles and things like that. So just a quick overview. We can spend as much time as we need, but a quick overview on visibility, because it could be a little bit confusing. In the WellSky Community Services HMIS system, visibility refers to what data in the HMIS can be seen by any individual user. Okay, I'll pause for a second to answer Gladys's question. When clients are transferred to other agencies, the move-in date becomes the entry date. Can you tell me how adjustments can be made to reflect this in HMIS timeliness? I think this is best discussed offline, but there's not anything we can, we can look at your timeliness report and see where that might be affecting it, and discuss with you and the data and performance group how we account for that. But in terms of the system date and timestamps, we can't go in and change those in terms of when the data entry was done for clients being enrolled, or what a new housing move-in date might look like, or anything like that. So on a case-by-case basis, I think we'll have to look and see where those things are affecting any of the timeliness numbers that come out of data quality. But since we're using system-generated date and timestamps with each record, we don't have access to go in and change those. So we'll need some way to identify on a per project basis where those things might be occurring. But we can talk about that offline if you like, Gladys. Okay. So visibility is what each user can see in the HMIS, and it's based on one or multiple of the following components by client. So clients can be locked with specific exceptions. So if a client is fleeing domestic violence or other issues, the client record can be locked so that only a particular agency can see it, which would restrict the view of other users and other agencies. By the HMIS data type, so entry exits can be shared, assessments can be shared, services can be shared individually, and in the case of assessments, by assessment in terms of which agencies can see and which projects can see other data from other projects, and by the user role and what agency or project the user may be assigned to. So those are sort of the levers. Those are the things that we can change and try to control to limit that. And right now the system is relatively closed in terms of sharing that data, which has implications for obviously data sharing, for visibility, for how much of a client's history can be seen by anybody trying to service that client. And so the proposal to the federal government is this All Inside project is to hopefully improve what's seen about a client and address their needs more comprehensively and holistically by making the data more visible across agencies and across projects. So in terms of the HMIS items that we can control, we can adjust the visibility on individual clients, on client demographics, on all sorts of notes, client notes, case notes, need notes, the actual entry exits, file attachments, assessments, services, and the case manager assigned to the client. The current model is shown in the second column. Generally, the client data is shared and the entry exits are shared and everything else is not. And under the new model, the starting point anyway is that all of those different things would be shared across agencies. So any data for any client is shared and visible to everyone looking at that client's history in the system. So we will be sharing as we get the work plan approved by the HMIS committee, and as we start working on doing these various adjustments to the system, we'll be sharing more about what that plan looks like and what the impacts of it are and that sort of thing. But I just want to do a quick, as I said, overview of visibility so that there's a common understanding of what kinds of things we're talking about, what kinds of things we're looking to adjust, and see if there are any questions about that before we move forward with anything else. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them in real time here, or we can do them at a later date also. Okay. Another item is in April, we changed how client contact information is collected. There's been a little bit of confusion and access issues with getting at the client contact information, so we thought we'd cover that with the ATAs. And if any of your users, folks who are getting referrals from coordinated entry, in some cases seem to be having the most problem with this, and so if we're able to help them, great. If not, please direct them to the help desk so that, or to the CE group, so we can get these things able to be used more effectively. So providers who are receiving referrals from coordinated entry or the homeless prevention call center, to find the client contact information in HMIS, the client profile should be used. So if you click on the client profile, it's actually the third set of information. Sometimes it takes a little while to load, but it's shown on the screen there. And in addition to the referral folks, we're encouraging everyone to put client contact information into the sub-assessment, so that within the system we have good client contact information for each client. One of the other things that we think might be happening is that users may be in enter data as mode, EDA, when they try to go find the client profile, client contact information, and that often will not work out correctly. And I think if your folks are using enter data as mode, we should probably discuss that and find out why that's happening to make sure that it's a good way to be entering the data in the first place. But for the client contact information, please make sure that that your users know not to be in EDA mode when they're trying to access that information. Any questions on that? Okay. The next item is updates to DFSS quarterly reports. There are some internal data, I should say that, COC custom data that we record for each project to further differentiate beyond the program type that HUD defines, where different projects fall in what's called the Chicago program model and the DFSS program model. The DFSS reports used to use both the DFSS program model and the Chicago program model, and that was getting very confusing and unnecessary. So we recently went through some cleanup and redefinition of things with DFSS so that we had complete DFSS program model information for each project. And for new folks, DFSS is the Department of Family and Support Services in the city of Chicago. And so the reports that were being run also looked at both the Chicago program model and the DFSS program model for filtering and for display of information in those reports. So those reports have been changed both in terms of the filtering and the columns that are displayed in the reports. So there's no change that anyone needs to make in how they operate, right? These are all basically internal kinds of changes to streamline how we're using the data. But just a heads up and to be aware that the reports themselves have changed so that only the DFSS program model is being displayed. So you may notice that the Chicago model is no longer being displayed, and that's okay. That's intended. Only the DFSS model is being displayed from now on. Any question on that? Okay. Moving on to data quality, which is currently in process for the second quarter. Please make sure that all your corrections are completed by Thursday, since the deadline is Friday. And since Business Objects is a day behind, when you run the reports on Friday to submit them, if you do that, it will only include data through Thursday. So please make sure the corrections are done by then. As a reminder, when you submit the files, there should be a separate data quality report file, a separate Excel spreadsheet for each project. Please don't combine projects. Please make sure you're running the COC specific data quality report and not the one that is included by WellSky under their data quality reporting. We do have examples of folks sending those in instead of the one that we use for our actual data quality metrics. And you can attach all of them in a single submission, a single email, and send it to dataquality@allchicago.org. We have a help desk article that's linked in the slides here. If you're having difficulties or questions, we can still do office hours upon request. Please contact the help desk to request a session. We're happy to help, and we found that those office hours are quite useful and effective in resolving any issues you may be having in running the reports or correcting data or things like that. Also, please note that the utilization report has been updated for rapid rehousing projects to reflect the same thing that is done in the HIC reporting for HUD, so that the current occupancy of the project is the project inventory. And we'll post results next week. There's a question in, should we be deleting the client detail tabs when we submit? Can we get confirmation also when we submit? Yes, there should be emails going back when the files are received. I'm not sure about the question about deleting the client detail tabs when we submit. Alex, can you respond to that one?
Yes, when submitting the data quality reports, you will want to submit the entire report, including the additional tabs. So the DFSS report is probably an example where the details tab is not included in submission, but for data quality, you want to include the entire report.
Thanks, Alex. Other questions? Oops. Okay, next topic is the reports that are sent to agency technical administrators on a regular basis. There are several of those reports. They're sent to the identified ATAs in each agency. If you're not receiving those, it means that you're not identified in the system as an ATA, so please let us know at the help desk if you're not receiving these reports for your agency. The assumption is that the agency technical administrator is routing the reports to the appropriate persons in the agency if the ATA is not the one who acts on them. So just to go through the list of the reports, there's a match to enrollment report that has an Excel attachment called match to enrollment. It's sent out every week on Monday, and that's a list of all the referrals to the project and the outcomes. The outcomes being were they enrolled in the referred to project, where they moved in, things like that. There's an enrollment timeliness report, and it has an attachment named Enrollment Update Timeliness Weekly. It's also an Excel file. It's sent out every Wednesday, and that's a list of all referrals to a project and the timeliness of the enrollments. And there's a metric in there for which ones are out of standard with the timeliness. There's a utilization report that goes out to ATAs for permanent supportive housing projects. The attachment there is called utilization. It's also an Excel attachment. It goes out every Thursday. And it basically shows the current inventory defined in HMIS and the number of enrollments that are active, the number of moved in enrollments that are active on that date, and computes the utilization percentage of the number of clients moved in divided by the total number of beds, the total number of, and for the total number of households divided by the total number of units. There's a annual assessment tracker that's sent out monthly on the first Monday of the month. There's an attachment name of annual assessment tracker, and it's an Excel file also. And that's a list of clients due for an annual assessment. And then there are needs status update reminders that have no attachments, and those are run daily from Monday through Friday, and that's a list of clients with a need status indicating that it's in process, and that need status has been existing for 10 days, 15 days, 40 or 45 days. So there are 4 separate reports that go out for each one of those time spans. Our timeliness number of days for services based off of shelter point. Sandra, is this a data quality question? Because that's a different set of reports than this. Okay. So services can be entered. One set of services can be entered for people who get housed in shelters through Shelter Point. There are other services that could be entered, things like referrals or other services that get entered through the services module, not through Shelter Point. But the timeliness for anything in the timeliness report is the difference between the date that's entered for the service being provided in this case versus the entry date, the system timestamp for when it was entered. So it would depend on the service. I don't know which services you're referring to specifically. Some of them may be being entered through Shelter Point. we can, if you have specific things, we can set up a conference and go through any specific questions you have on specific rows or lines in the timeliness report, but we can go through that in detail if you like. Any questions on any of the reports? Again, if you're not receiving these reports, I mean, in the case of utilization, maybe because you don't have a permanent supportive housing project, but or that you're not getting referrals through coordinated entry. But if there are reports here that you think you should be getting and you're not, please let us know through the help desk. And also, if you're not the person who's processing those things, please make sure that you identify and get them to the folks who need to be receiving them, who are involved in those processes. Quarterly COC HMIS webinars. So other COCs that we've spoken to have had success with conducting quarterly webinars on topics of interest in using the HMIS. We'd love to have your feedback as to what topics to include for these webinars. Want to keep engaging both ATAs and all other users and addressing things that may be confusing, of interest, needing more reinforcement or other kinds of information about them. Some things that we've thought of would be data entry for the sub-assessments. That always seems to confuse everybody. So the income, disability, non-cash benefits, insurance are just some examples of those. APR reporting, housing move-in dates are a particular issue with some agencies and projects. Making folks more familiar with what the various points in time are with HMIS. That seems to be a point of confusion of what to do at entry, what to do at update, what to do at exit. Those are just things that we've thought of. If you have ideas for them you'd like to share with us. Yes, Dana, they would be open to all HMIS users. So if you have ideas for those, you can share them in the questions part. If you want to send me an email, that'd be great too. But we want to make sure that we're not just pulling out of thin air which things we should focus on. This group deals with users on a daily basis within the agencies actually doing the interaction with HMIS. We want to make sure that it's useful and meaningful and effective in terms of what we deliver to the users of the HMIS in the community. So if you have ideas, please share them either right now or whenever you're comfortable with doing that. Thank you, Angela. Any other comments or questions on this part? Any other questions on topics in the webinar? Okay, we'll hang on for a few more minutes. It concludes the content for this webinar. Thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for participating in the data quality process. if you have questions and want to stick around or want to stick around and see if anybody else has questions, you're welcome to, but otherwise we can give you a few minutes of your day back. And thank you very much for coming to the webinar today. Yes, Paris, is there a question you have? You can just type it into the question thing there. We can answer it. Paris, I unmuted you. What's your question?
Hello. Is it a possibility to merge the HUD verification and the magnifying glass together? I've been giving weekly lessons with my staff, and we found it a little bit confusing because one shows the date of other agencies' entries, and the HUD verification just shows what is checked off, right? And it's creating mismatch errors on my DQ reports for the last few DQs that I've been the ATA.
So you're talking about the HUD verification on a specific type of sub-assessment?
Yeah, when you go over the sub-assessments, because that was one of the questions that you had asked if we had any like insights or
So there's no, I'm asking for topics that we can cover. In terms of the navigation of the system and what the look and feel and process is within the system, we can ask WellSky to update it, but we can't make any change. We can do no customization in the user interface ourselves.
Okay.
We can't make it behave any differently.
Yes.
I'm a little puzzled in saying that you're seeing things from other agencies, unless we've set up some visibility sharing between you and other agencies for the sub-assessment data. You should really only be seeing your own.
Okay. It's okay. So if we have a referral, right, and it comes over, it seems as if whoever entered the initial assessment, that data comes over when we open up a new assessment for a client.
If they've shared everything for the client, and Alex, if you're still on, you can weigh in on this. If they've shared the client data from the coordinated entry assessment, that data may be in there, but for the most part, I'm not sure that coordinated entry group is doing any sub-assessments really. And I believe that's on a non-shared assessment with respect to other agencies.
Yeah, so for the most part, that is true. But just in general, there is a possibility that you are going to see data about a client that wasn't entered by your agency. In most cases, that effective date for those answers will be prior to your enrollment of the client.
Yes.
So for example, the sub-assessment, if you're seeing entries from other sources outside of your agency, the date for that is probably prior to the date that you're going to be enrolled in the client. So if that information is incorrect for a standard question, you can always change the question or change the answer to what's appropriate. For the sub-assessment, you would have to put an end date for those entries. So any mismatch errors you're receiving in data quality between the HUD verification and any entries that you have, that's pretty much the only way to solve it. That's pretty much meaning that you have a yes or no answer to the initial sub-assessment question that's prior to the sub-assessment, and within the sub-assessment it doesn't meet what was selected. So if you select yes, then all of your HUD verifications probably indicate no, or vice versa. But again, we can talk through that if you want to submit a help desk ticket.
Okay. No, I mean, that's what I instructed the staff to do. I was just trying to see if it was any ways to make it a bit easier. That was it.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Well, no
Sure,
problem.
no problem. Thanks for the question. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, we're going to end the webinar now. Again, thank you everyone for participating, and enjoy the rest of your day.